Helena called back, I need to give the flowers something that can't be hacked. In the center of the garden, beneath the ancient oak, Helena knelt. She didn't use a computer. She used her voice. She began to sing the low, melodic vibration she had discovered as a child. It was a song of memory of Boniface's goggles, of Sam's tweed jacket, of Ruth's ink-stained fingers, and of the 500 years of peace that the stone had absorbed. As she sang, a miracle occurred. The indigo gold flowers began to pulse. Their bioluminescence didn't just glow. It projected a field of energy that short-circuited the sophisticated scanning drones hovering above the convent. The cyber attack hit a wall of pure, living intent. The servers stabilized. The firewalls held. The digital ghost of Ouroboros found itself staring into an eye. It could not understand the living eye of Providence. Chapter 25. The Foundation of the Soul. The following morning, Julian returned. He looked exactly as he had decades ago, as if the Cotswold mist had preserved him in amber. He found Helena in the lab, exhausted but triumphant. You've done more than protect the seeds, Helena, Julian said, his eyes filled with a new respect. You've proven that the heirloom isn't just botanical, it's human. The seeds are just the medium. The message is the resonance between the earth and the soul. Julian handed her a final artifact, a small, translucent stone found in the same Middle Eastern ruins where Elias and Helena had once stood. This is the anchor. It doesn't contain a code. It contains a vibration of absolute peace. Place it at the center of the north cloister. As Helena placed the anchor, the entire convent seemed to sigh. The stone heart was no longer just a metaphor. It was a radiant, transparent reality. The Institute would continue to heal the world, but it would do so on its own. Terms guarded not just by police or scientists. Helena stood at the arched window, the same one where Sister Boniface had stood so many years ago. The mist was lifting, revealing the rolling hills of Great Slaughter. She saw her mother, Ruth, sitting in the courtyard, writing the final chapter of her memoirs. She saw her father, Sam, laughing with Felix. The foundations were not just safe, they were eternal. The Stone Heart of St. Vincent, a novel of mystery, romance, and redemption in Great Slaughter. Chapter 1. The Echo of 500 Years. The mist clung to the rolling hills of Great Slaughter like a shroud of grey silk, damp and unyielding. It was a morning that felt heavy with the weight of centuries, the kind of Cotswold dawn where the line between the earth and the sky blurred into a singular, melancholic silver. For Sister Boniface, standing at the arched window of her laboratory at St. Vincent's Convent, the view was bittersweet. For 500 years, this stone edifice had stood as a bastion of peace, a sanctuary for the broken, a fortress for the devoted, and, more recently, a world-class hub for forensic chemistry. Now, the air smelled of change, and to Boniface's sensitive nose, it was a foul vintage. It smelled of the cold, metallic ink on legal contracts, and the acrid diesel fumes of a progress that didn't care for prayer. 500 years, she whispered, her breath fogging the ancient glass. Enduring perennial, this be the time of our quincentennial, and yet, it feels like an ending. She wasn't just reciting history. She was reciting a eulogy. The convent, the only home she had known for decades, was being sold. The land, which had witnessed the rise and fall of Tudor kings and the quiet endurance of local farmers, was destined to become Lord Adam Sedgwick Towers. To the developers, it was a modern luxury living solution. To Boniface, looking at the blueprints, it looked like a skeletal cage of glass and steel designed to imprison the soul of the village. In the courtyard below, the rehearsals for the pageant were underway, providing a chaotic soundtrack to her mourning. Miss Thimble, the town's most anxious music teacher, was waving her baton with a frantic energy that suggested she was trying to ward off evil spirits rather than conduct a choir. No, 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 Dottie, the voice of Sister Peter, boomed from the makeshift stage, echoing off the limestone walls. Music needs to flow around my words like a river, not a flood. Dottie, do remember, your cue is the Reverend Mother symbolically handing over the key. It's a moment of dignity, not a race to the finish line. So sorry, Dottie squeaked from behind the piano, clutching her sheet music as if it were a life raft. I was worried I'd missed the dramatic pause. Sister Boniface smiled despite the ache in her chest. The pageant was Reverend Mother Adrian's idea, a way for the sisters to go out with their heads held high. It was an odd time to celebrate, but as the Reverend Mother often said, the Lord loves a joyful noise. even in the midst of a storm, especially when the storm is wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase. A sharp knock at the lab door broke a reverie. Inspector Sam Gillespie stood there, looking profoundly uncomfortable in his tweed jacket. Beside him was Felix Livingston, the young, earnest sergeant, who had become like a son to the sisters. Inspector Boniface greeted them, turning from the window with a practiced mask of cheer. "I assume you aren't here for a chemical analysis of the sacramental wine, though I must say, the 1962 vintage is surprisingly robust." Sam sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. He looked tired, the kind of tiredness that comes from seeing a world you love slowly being dismantled. "Lord Sedgwick is here. Sister and that fellow, they've brought a model of the proposed development. They want it on stage for the speeches tomorrow. A vision of the future, they call it. A model of our demise," Boniface noted dryly. "It's progress, they say," Felix added, though his tone suggested he was quoting a textbook he found particularly distasteful. They descended to the main hall, where the air was thick with the tension of a funeral. Lord Matthew Sedgwick, the current Earl, stood by a draped object. He looked older than his years, his face a map of hidden debts and inherited burdens. Beside him stood Ronnie, a developer with a shark-like grin and eyes that seemed to be calculating the square footage of the chapel's altar. "Ah, Sister Boniface," Lord Matthew said, his voice strained. "I know this is difficult. My father loved St. Vincent's dearly. I just wish, well, circumstances being what they are. Circumstances usually involve a lack of imagination." "My lord," Boniface replied gently. Her eyes meeting his, Matthew looked away first. Suddenly, the heavy oak door swung open. A woman entered with the stride of someone who owned the world, or at least intended to edit it. She was dressed in sharp London fashion, a camera slung over her shoulder and a notebook tucked under her arm. "Ruth," Sam gasped, his entire posture changing in a heartbeat. "In the flesh, Sam. Or as much flesh as a journalist is allowed these days," Ruth Penny replied, her eyes sparkling with a familiar, dangerous mischief. The room shifted. Ruth Penny was a force of nature, a woman who had left great slaughter to chase headlines but had never truly left the hearts of those she'd left behind, especially Sam. The silence between them was loud, filled with the ghosts of a dozen unsaid things. "I'm working on a story," Ruth explained, ignoring the stunned silence of the others. "How the St. Vincent's development could be rolled out nationwide, a blueprint for modern living in ancient spaces. The London papers are obsessed with it." "Tomorrow is about the story of this town, Miss Penny," interjected Lynn Goodwin, the council leader, who had appeared from the shadows like a cat. "Not world domination. I shall be doing the unveiling." With a flourish, Lynn pulled the cloth away. The model was a glass and steel monstrosity, sitting on the ancient stone floor like an alien craft that had crashed into a cathedral. "I give you Lord Adam Sedgwick Towers," Lynn announced. "Oh, my," whispered Sister Peter, crossing herself. "Progress," Panissa said, stepping forward. "Like a shark, we keep moving forward, or we die." But as the group marveled or mourned over the model, a shadow fell across the doorway. A small, stooped figure in a dusty habit stood there, leaning on a wooden staff. It was Sister Helena, the legendary archaeologist who had spent half her life in the dirt of the Holy Land. "You call this progress?" Helena's voice was like grinding stones. "You are building on foundations you do not understand. You play with the surface of things, while the truth remains buried beneath your feet." Chapter 2. The arrival of Sister Helena changed the atmosphere of the convent instantly. She was a woman of formidable intellect and even more formidable silence. While the other sisters were busy packing linens and prayer books, Helena was seen wandering the chapel with a magnifying glass and a notebook, her lips moving in silent prayer or perhaps a secret calculation. Sister Boniface found her later that afternoon in the north transept, staring at a bronze plaque dedicated to the late Earl. Sister Helena Boniface said softly, "I've read all your papers. Egypt Mochu. Your work in Ephesus was extraordinary. You found the hidden aqueduct when everyone else said there was only dust." Helena turned, her eyes sharp behind thick lenses. All right. That's enough, Boniface. I've admired your work too. Your forensic deductions. You have an eye for the small things that God hides in plain sight. Most people look at the world and see a forest. You and I, we see the veins in the leaves." "Golly," Boniface blushed. "But why are you here now? You examined this chapel years ago." Helena leaned